Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today, we are going to present about vector spaces. We are in a group of three. I am Nur Arisa binti Rusman and another two members, Nik Nur Kristina binti Adnan and Nur Irdina Dayana binti Ramli. Introduction. Most physical quantities can be described by measurement called the scalar of constant. However, there are other physical quantities that cannot be described as easily as this. They need not only magnitude but also direction. This type of quantity that needs magnitude and direction is called a vector. Also, under suitable definitions of additions and scalar multiplication, other mathematical quantities such as matrix and polynomials can be considered as vectors. Furthermore, any set of vectors that obey certain rules known as axiom is called a vector space. Our objective of the studies are to recognize a vector, know the terms associated with a vector and its notation, to perform basic operations on vectors, to find unit vectors, and to find the dot between two vectors and the angle between two non-zero vectors. Executive summary. Our overview of the study is to discuss on how the vectors will be applied in real-life problems. The problem: a ship had sailed off from Malaysia to Singapore before going to Indonesia and lastly going back to the main point Malaysia. The graph shown the routes of the ship on a 2D ships. As this ship took a trip to these two countries, it has created three different angles, which are M, S, and I. You need to determine all the values of these angles. The solution are: list down all the information from the question, find the vector for each way directed, find the magnitude for each vectors, find the angles of M, S, and I.
Now, I will explain to you the purpose of study. Vectors in mathematics is a quantity that has both magnitude and directions. Examples of such are velocity and acceleration. Through the study, we want to explore the involvement of vectors in calculating the angles of the route taken by a boat. Next, we want to show the participations of vectors in determining the direction taken by the boat. Also, we want to measure the distance created from the starting point of the route to the next point. Last but not least, we want to explore the measurement of a magnitude of a vector. Let me restate the problem statement. A ship had sailed off from Malaysia to Singapore before going to Indonesia and lastly going back to the main point, which is Malaysia. There is a graph given, and in this graph shows the route of the ship on a 2D sketch. As this ship took a trip to these two countries, it has created three different angles, which are A, B, and C. Now we need to determine all the values of these angles.
Next, methodology. Listing all the information, we need to find answer A, B, and C. Let the point as Malaysia 00, Singapore 86, Indonesia 1317. Make sure every direct line have their starting and ending point. Then we let the vector MS, SI, IM as U, V, and W. Line from M S1, Y1 to P S2, Y2 can be notated as vector MP x2 minus x1, y2 minus y1. Magnitude of vector can be determined by Pythagoras theorem. Calculate angle using the dot product.
Now we will calculate the angles that we want, which are A, B, and C. We will calculate the angles using the definition 5 dot product, where vector u dot vector v equals to magnitude of a vector u times magnitude of a vector v times cos theta. First, let's find angle A. To find angle A, we will need to find the vectors first. As the ship started from Malaysia to Singapore, let u equals to ms, where point S minus point M, resulting to the values of u equals to 8 and 6. Next vector is vector W, where from Malaysia to Indonesia, point I minus point M, resulting to vectors W equals to 13 and 17. Then, calculate the magnitude of a vector for both vectors. To calculate magnitude of a vector, we need to square root the sum of vectors square. As you can see here, we get magnitude of a vector u equals to 10 and magnitude of a vector w equals to square root 458. Then, we need to find the value of vector u dot vectors w, where we get 206. As all the values are earned, substitute the value into the formula. The end value for angle A is 15.72 degrees. Next, let's find angle B. To find angle B, we will need to find another vector. As the ship continues from Singapore to Indonesia, let V equals to SI, where I minus S, resulting the values of V equals to 5 and 11. Next vector is vector U, where from Singapore to Malaysia, S minus M, resulting to vector U negative, where U equals to negative 8 and negative 6. Next, calculate the magnitude of a vector for both vectors. Here we get magnitude of a vector V equals to square root 146 and magnitude of a vector U equals to 10. Then, we need to find the value of vectors v dot vectors u, where we get negative 106. As all the values are earned, substitute the value into the formula. The end value for angle B is 151.31 degrees. Last but not least, the angle C. To find angle C, we will take the vectors from I to S and let v equals to is. So the vectors v here is negative 5 and negative 11. The next vector is vector w, where w equals to im from Indonesia to Malaysia, and we will get negative 13 and negative 17. Calculate the magnitude of the vectors, and we will get magnitude of a vector v equals to square root 146 and magnitude of a vector w equals to square root 458. Next, the value of v dot w equals to 252. And using the same process and the same formula, we're going to substitute all the values into the formula. And we will get the angles of C is 12.96 degrees. From the discussion that we made, based on the case study, we can determine the angle of vector A, B, and C by outlining all the angles and the points for each country with M as Malaysia, S as Singapore, and I as Indonesia. After that, we have to find the vectors for each directed line. We have to make sure there is a starting and end point in each directed line. Then, we let vector U as MS, V as SI, and W as IM. Next, we find the magnitude for each vector by using Pythagoras theorem. For angle A, the vectors involved are u and w. Meanwhile, for angle B, the vectors involved are vector u and v. Lastly, the vector involved in angle C are v and w. Based on the calculation, we can conclude that the angles A equals to 15.72 degree, B equals to 151.31 degree, and C equals to 12.96 degree.
In conclusion, we could conclude from this topic that vector space is very important in our daily life. We also can conclude that the vector and magnitude to obtain the answer of the boat using the coordinate. From all above, we can conclude that using basic vector operation to determine the answer of the point of each country is a viable option. As a result, passengers on board will be safe and will not crash while on the trip.